welcome to Tech Talks, the People and Planet podcast. Today I'm joined by Jonathan Patrick, the CEO of healthcare technology platform Consultant Connect. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. Good to meet you.
Great to meet you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Jonathan, I'm interested. You guys are doing an awful lot with the NHS. It's well publicised that there's an awful lot going on there when it comes to healthcare technology. Share with us the problem that Consultant Connect addresses. What's the mission?
So the mission really is to get people the care they need faster. And I'll say at the outset, the whole idea behind Consultant Connect was not my idea. I don't think I've had a decent idea in my entire life, but I do know. But I do know a good idea when I see one. And what happened was I also interestingly hate going to conferences, and I really hate networking as well. And then just serendipitously, I ended up at a conference. And I got talking to one of the speakers who turned out to be my co-founder, Roger Tweedale, from Consultant Connect. And we just got chatting and he said, well, do you know what? I've had an idea. And he was saying that he had seen and been involved in a sort of very Heath Robinson experiment to connect GPs in Bristol with cardiologists in Bristol. And the results, although there wasn't a huge amount of data, the results were eye-opening, which were that if a GP spoke to a consultant, approximately 70% of the occasions they spoke to a consultant, the patient would avoid a trip to hospital. Oh. And you can probably imagine why that's the case, because first of all, the consultant, sort of like it's bolt-on expertise. Yeah. But the second thing is that a GP can actually do most of the things that a consultant can do, including certain diagnostics and prescribing. And so if the consultant said, well, what I'd do is I'd do an ECG. I'm not a cardiologist, but I know these things happen. So if they said I'd do an ECG or I might prescribe these pills, the GP was able to do that there and then for their patient. And that was obviously brilliant because the patient get the care they need immediately. And of course, by avoiding a delay, that's obviously going to be a better outcome for the patient. But the second thing was the patient, if they did need to go to hospital, would be sent to the right place first time. And so it meant that there were fewer people going onto the waiting list, but those that were going onto the waiting list were being sent to the right place because they needed that hospital care. So what we wondered was it possible to sort of like democratize this access to hospital clinicians? And at the time, so this is back in 2015, at the time, if you tried calling a hospital to speak to a specialist, you'd probably have a 10 to 20% chance of getting through, but it would be a 10, sometimes 15-minute wait. And so if you're a busy GP, and GPs even back then were horrendously busy, I'm not saying it's as bad as it is now, but they were horrendously busy. If you were given a 20% chance of getting through to a consultant, then you do, or at least where I would do it, I would certainly refer that patient. So what we did was we set up a system that enabled a GP to call a number that would then dial through a rota of consultants who might be available. Okay. And the idea was it would try one, and if they either rejected the call or they didn't answer, it would skip on to the next consultant and so on and so forth until the call was answered. And so we built this system. Amazingly, we launched it with a customer in Northeast Essex, so Northeast Essex CCG, back in June of 2015. And amazingly, the numbers were almost identical to the ones that Roger Tweedale had seen in Bristol. So yes, and it grew from there. So it was a classic example of get something into the NHS, try it out, get the data, and then tell as many people about it as you possibly can. And then it sort of spread from there. And we had what I'd describe as we started a reasonable clip in 2015. Then it just sort of accelerated. And really, I think, along with a lot of remote medicine platforms, our moment in the sun was during the pandemic, when suddenly the whole matter of going to hospital, indeed the whole matter of going to a GP, became a lot more fraught.
Yeah.
So the value of our approach then sort of like came into its own. So yes, so that's what we do. It's still what we do today, along with a few things where we've developed the service. But if you ask me what we're about, that's the core thing we're about. We're about making sure that patients get the right care by offering clinicians access to their peers for advice and guidance when they need it.
Love it. So just to clarify, the patient gets the right care faster. And on the opposite side, on the actual clinician side of things, the workload, the stress, the burden is reduced because, hopefully those patients can be, or 70% you said, can be treated by a GP and not have to actually go into the hospital. And we all know what, the challenges are when you go into a hospital in terms of waiting times and all that sort of stuff. So potentially that can be reduced as well.
Yes, and that's exactly right. And that indeed is what we've seen as we've as we've grown. I mean, there's been various audits, some of which we've been part of, but some which took place without our knowledge, just to validate what we were doing. And yes, that's the way it's gone. And in fact, what we've seen in this past nearly 10 years that we've been operating for is a shift towards this advice first approach. So the idea now is the NHS is moving towards the idea that rather than just sending somebody into hospital now, you will always get advice first. Now, there's a lot of moving parts involved in that, and it's not fully rolled out everywhere. And Consultant Connect is only one part of the system for making sure that people get advice first. But it's definitely the right direction.
Yeah.
And, it's... The fact that we were able to get this, I mean, famously, making progress in the NHS is slow, but we cover, by our 9th year, we were covering over half of the NHS, and that's actually pretty swift. And the reason for this is we have this immensely stressed healthcare system, and it's obviously the thing, it's a first world healthcare system, but the thing that differs from all other healthcare systems is it is free at the point of access. It's the kindest healthcare system in the world, but it's under incredible pressure, and as a consequence, it's a breeding ground for incredible tech solutions. The NHS is brilliant at trying things out simply because it's forced into a corner so often.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys, that was one product, I guess you would call it, that you've just described there. But I believe there's multiple within the set, within the range of products that you guys do. Can you share a little bit more about the other products?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they all sort of go along with this theme of getting the patient the right care first time. Yeah. So we initially started, so the access to advice and guidance was initially through telephone, and that's really where we made our name. So instant advice and guidance. So the GP can have a patient with them. If they use Consultant Connect, they have an over 90% chance of being connected first time within 30 seconds.
Really?
So we've changed this dynamic of a 20% chance of getting through after a 10 to 12 minute wait. So that means, it can be used. What we then found was, and this happens to all businesses, we found that working with our customers, they had other challenges they'd like us to look at. So the first of these was dermatology, which is a phone call's no good, really, to discuss what somebody's skin looks like. So we were working with Kings and Guys back in 2017, and they said, please, can you develop us something to solve that? And so we came up with a system whereby you can take photos on your phone, but they're not saved to your photo roll. So you haven't got photos of, your holiday and then people's skin conditions, and we're laughing, but that is exactly what was happening. So yeah. that was actually the need. So we developed that. And in fact, now our teledermatology, we developed that. So from just taking photos to being able to share photos through messages in a not sort of dissimilar approach to WhatsApp. And it's now the most used teledermatology platform in the UK. So to give you an idea, there was a contract tendered for the whole of Scotland at the end of last year, and we won that contract. And so we are rolling out our product across the whole of Scotland to add to large portions of England, and also we've got the contract for the whole of Wales for Telederm. So so that is what it sounds like. Sending a photo, within 4 hours you get the opinion of a consultant back, 4 to 6 hours. And then other things that we do, again on this principle, we do this thing called referral triage. So if you're actually already in a waiting list at a hospital, what we can do is we can access that waiting list, and we can now provide this national network of consultants to triage these, to make sure that you're going to the right place. Because again, well, I mean, there's all sorts of concerns with staying on a waiting list for a long time. So, for example, we're doing a lot in neurology at the moment. Neurology is an area of medicine which is famously underserved. And what it means is you often have waiting lists of over a year. And of course, you can imagine if you're running a hospital, that will cause you to stay awake at night, because you don't actually know how bad it is, how dangerous it is for those people to be on a waiting list. But by triaging the waiting list, almost half of the patients will come off the waiting list and be dealt with by a local doctor, but the rest will be sent to the right place first time, including if it's an urgent case. Yeah. So they'll be upgraded. Someone will look at it and go, actually, this is worse than it looks. They need to be upgraded and they need to be seen quickly. And again, that's better care. So we call that sort of, I think in the NHS, they call that risk stratification. Okay. So you've got the, sort of like separating out the high risk ones, because we often talk about patients, sort of like, and it's partly because it's what the NHS wants to talk about, is patients avoiding hospital. But actually, when patients do need to go to hospital, making sure they're seen as quickly as it's appropriate for them, is a big part of the puzzle as well. And we've had some great stories over the years of, people being sent to hospital because somebody was unhappy and them having a heart attack in the car park and being saved because they were in the right place at the right time, literally in the right place at the right time.
Everyone's got stories like that, haven't they? Where it resonates with them. Everyone's been, involved with the NHS at some point in this country. So really good stuff. You talk a lot about the NHS and the opportunities that the point of care and the access to it present. What are those opportunities? You've talked about some of the products that you've already got going in there at the moment. Where do you see those opportunities moving forward?
So I'm going to say, so I think the first thing is that the scale of the opportunity in the NHS is enormous. And the reason for that is, as I say, this willingness to try things out. Yeah. But also, one of the things that sometimes people talk about as a weakness with the NHS is its structure, but it's also a strength, which is you have in NHS England, for example, you have it broken down into lots of ICBs, integrated care boards. In Wales and Scotland, the areas are broken down into health boards. And what that actually means is it's not very common that a solution is adopted at a sort of a high level and just, rolled out across the NHS. It means that you can go into individual areas with individual problems, where the problems are most acute, and you can offer to help them, and they will often find ways to make things happen so they can try something out. And so, and this is brilliant for anybody that's involved in healthcare innovation. There are lots of opportunities to try things out. I must say, and I know this is controversial, I know a lot of people think these things are brilliant. I'm not a big fan of accelerators and things like that. I don't think they're a substitute for actually getting a product into the NHS and selling it in the NHS. If you can demonstrate the value of something in the NHS and make it worth somebody's while to get budget sign-off, then that's as clear a market signal that you will ever have that your product has a future. So I'd say the first thing about the NHS is what are we going to see? The answer is we're likely to see everything that's new. We've got a great opportunity to see everything that's new, because there are so many different ways to get into the NHS, so many different problems, so many angles to see the problems from. But then on top of that, we do have AI coming. And do you know what? I am slightly worn out with AI and slightly bored by AI. But it is starting to have an impact. We've seen it in certain consumer businesses, you know, being used for things like customer service. I think there's opportunities to do that. You know, that's fantastic. But where I think it's got its largest value is in pattern recognition. You know, so being able to take scans effectively, to go through a scan and to identify something that a doctor's naked eye may or may not pick up.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen, I think in the past week, there's been something published about, I think it was lung cancers being spotted by this AI. There's also some great work happening with skin cancer in the UK and NHS England. This is something that I think NHS England will roll out from the top level, but artificial intelligence for identifying skin cancers, I think that's another thing where we'll see instant results. I've also seen stuff to do with brain scans. You can tell I'm a real clinician here. Brain scans. They've got proper names, but AI to again spot these patterns is AI to spot these patterns is part of the future, without a doubt.
100% agree, and I speak to lots of people that are actually solving those sorts of problems with AI. Talked to one lady actually over in the US recently that's doing something with breast cancer, in particular deep tissue that kind of doesn't spot it with the naked eye, but AI can actually detect it. The other thing that I find is that AI is helping with the workload, the burden on the healthcare workers, where they're not necessarily doing the job that they signed up to do, which is treat the patients. They're doing a lot of admin, as you know, and AI is helping with that as well. So I do think it's got some real good purposes moving forward.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And every now and then I hear stuff about there's an ongoing joke, which they won't appreciate me saying. I'll expect to hear a few complaints about this, but I've heard a few suggestions that dermatologists are a bit disconcerted by the advance of AI, because it's somehow going to be replacing them, but it's absolutely not. You know, at best, I think certainly for the next couple of decades, I think what we'll be looking at is AI being an increasingly reliable second opinion. But I've seen quite a few examples in skin where AI has incorrect, even though it's getting better and better, particularly the skin cancer stuff. But I have seen stuff where it's not an error, but it's not correct, that high risk. They separate the lesions out into high risk and low risk in skin cancer, and sometimes the high risk lesions, so the high risk moles, are not cancer.
Yeah,
but they look high risk, so they're categorized as high risk. And what I mean is there's not 100% reliability yet that something is high risk is definitely cancer, but we'll get there. We'll move towards that more. But nonetheless, we don't have enough dermatologists today, so anything that's going to sort of improve that better. Let's have our dermatologists concentrating on the patients that need to be concentrated on.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what they signed up to, isn't it? You know. So, but what about you? What's your backstory? I think you started life as a solicitor, didn't you?
I didn't start life as a solicitor, but I went to being a solicitor. So so I went to university, had no idea what I was going to do afterwards. Apart from, interestingly, I was absolutely certain I would hate banking. And even now, I think I was probably right. But I started off on the graduate scheme at Procter & Gamble.
Okay.
And that was just fantastic. The brands I was in charge of, well, not in charge of, the brands that I was involved in, are very much not in charge of, were things like Oil of Olay, as it then was, Oil of Olay, yeah, Vicks Vapor Rub, Pantene Pro V, Wash and Go. Why take 2 bottles into the shower? You know, just take one. So anyway, so that was tremendous fun. a really, really brilliant introduction to the quite dry world of commerce. And then after that, I decided to do the law. And again, not because I had a massive desire to be a lawyer, but just because I didn't really have a massive desire to do anything. I hadn't found really what I wanted to do. So I went and became a commercial lawyer with an interest in intellectual property. And then after that, I joined a management consultancy, A.T. Kearney, which is one of the sort of the American strategy firms. And I think that was, for me, very formative, really terrific. I joined it at what I would say is the right age for me. The life of a consultant is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
You know, sort of like it used to be. So before we had communication tools like this, it used to be that you left home at 6 a.m. on a Monday, you went to wherever your client was, and then you got back home at sort of like 8 p.m. on a Thursday, and then you had Friday in the office. And that was actually quite demanding. And of course, people who had families and kids, this was not, optimal, but it was before that time for me. So I really sort of enjoyed that, got really stuck into that. And then what happened was my dad was running an engineering firm.
Yeah.
And he developed a condition that meant that he was struggling to run it. And he asked me to come and shut it down because I had a bit of familiarity with insolvency. But once I got there, I realized there was nothing wrong with the company. It was a great company. It just needed a bit of attention that my dad hadn't been able to give to it because he'd been getting ill. So I stayed there. I ultimately sold that company, but whilst I was running it, I set up another company, again, not my idea. And it was the first test and calibration company for GP surgeries. So it was my introduction to the NHS. I loved working with the NHS. You know, so my point of contact for this was, it was just the time when they had a thing, GP practice had a thing called QOF, the Quality and Outcomes Framework. There's no reason you would have heard of this. All you need to know is that you got points for doing certain things, and for every point you got a certain amount of money, and you got so many points if you had your surgery equipment tested and calibrated. But our innovation was we came to your surgery and we did it there and then about a third or a quarter of the price it would have cost you to send everything away. And a mantra of my entrepreneurial life has been cheaper and better equals successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I sold. So we set that up, and we also sold that. And then since then, I've also I met up with my business partner Scott and another of my business partners, Greg Jackson, and we set up a supplies business, a medical supplies business. Greg, by the way, so Scott still works for me now. Greg is the CEO of Octopus Energy, a small utility you may have heard of.
Yeah.
And so we are we're all business partners. We set up another medical business, which was, successful, didn't smash the lights out, but then we were in the right place at the right time when the Consultant Connect opportunity came along, and that's what it all built up to. And here I still am. I'm in my 10th year, and until this, I think my longest job, including the companies I owned, was under 5 years. So it's been a great experience. I'd recommend to anybody, if you can find something that works in tech, particularly in an area like healthcare, it's a hugely rewarding. It's a brilliant environment to be in.
Absolutely, and that will resonate with a lot of people that listen to this, I'm sure. But what comes next? What can people expect this year from Consultant Connect? So we have a number of things that we're working on, and it's very difficult. I don't like using the word exciting. They're exciting to us, but actually in the NHS, sort of like an absence of excitement is a good thing. Excitement tends to be brought on either by arriving at hospital too late, that sort of thing. So the sort of stuff that we're working on at the moment is there is a move these days to move patients on. It used to be that every patient that went to hospital would have a follow-up appointment. And often a follow-up appointment, I don't know if have you ever had a follow-up appointment? Yeah, I'm in the middle of this sort of procedure at the moment, actually.
Right, okay. So go on then. So what's your follow-up appointments been like?
Pretty cumbersome, to be honest with you. Yeah, a long waiting list, and the follow up was probably about 45 seconds, and I was sent away again.
Yeah, so 45 seconds is, I believe, a par for the course.
Yeah.
Well, so a follow-up appointment is literally, how's it going?
Yeah.
For most of them, so if it's
all right, okay, cheers, sign this. And
exactly. What are you doing here? So we're doing quite a bit of work at the moment with some of our colleagues in Coventry and Warwickshire on what are called PIFU pathways, patient-initiated follow-up pathways.
Okay.
And what this is a cleverer way of doing things. So this is already reasonably widespread in the NHS, but we're doing some work to make it, we hope, a bit cleverer. But the idea being that the moment you've had your procedure or whatever it is you've got, or the medication that you need, that they discharge you onto this thing where you have immediate access to either a team of clinicians or the right person to be able to decide what any follow-up should be. And the idea would be that you only use this if something goes wrong. So somebody gives you a leaflet and says, you don't need to contact us unless any of these things happen. In which case, if one of those things does happen, you've got an easy way back into the system. Yeah. And our understanding it, so early data is, sort of like well under 10% of people who would have these follow-up appointments end up having them. And the majority of them we expect can be dealt with remotely. So you're slightly worried about something, we can change your medication, or we can suggest to you on the phone something you can do to look after yourself a bit better. Or in the worst, well, not the worst case scenario, if appropriate, we can say, come on back in and we'll have another look at you because you're someone we need to see. But what we don't need is you going all the way to hospital, waiting ages, paying for parking, and a sandwich, and then being told, oh, well, I'm glad you're all right, see you in a year's time, sort of thing. Yeah. So we're working on, so I think is the most interesting thing we're doing. Yes.
Jonathan, it's all we've got time for. It's been really good to speak to you. It's been really insightful as well, learning about what you guys are up to. Guys, this is Jonathan Patrick, CEO of Consultant Connect. Jonathan, thanks again.
Thanks. Fabulous to meet you.